tension between quality and quantity, and oftentimes you couldn't achieve quality and quantity at the same time. But now it looks like AI, you can do that. Certainly, everything is elevated up. Quick example would be copywriting. Previously, you'd craft copy, you'd spend ages over it, and you'd only ever be able to do one or two of those things at any one time. But now with AI, you can absolutely do loads. And you could do it in such a way that makes it very difficult for anyone else to compete. So we have quality and quantity together, and I think that changes what we mean about quality, really. So yeah, it's going to be very, very
I
interesting.
agree. Yeah, I think one of the interesting
Anyway,
pieces on that is probably around feedback, actually. And you think about how do you provide feedback, quality feedback at scale? I think that's always been a challenge in recruiting. Um,
yeah,
and and I think that's one of those areas where there is significant opportunity to improve what you do at scale to people who have applied even at the top of the funnel,
yeah.
rather than just an assessment or interview. So that's going to be an interesting development, I think.
Let's remember to talk about that because I've just got a vision now of how AI may be able to provide high quality feedback at the top of funnel. But as you go further down the funnel and your interaction with other human beings become more prominent, that's when the human to human feedback comes in. And it might be a very sort of, it might actually be easier than we think. So we just got to imagine like, where is the interaction point,
Yeah,
and mirror
yeah.
that in terms of feedback. Anyway, folks, we're live, everybody. Welcome to Brainfood Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. It's episode 315, part of a two-part double header today, because there's another Brainfood Live later on this evening, would you believe, US time zone wise. But today we're going to be focusing on a really interesting conversation, talking about how the world of artificial intelligence, how that's changing the world of work, particularly the types of sort of shapes organizations might take, and how that then influences the sort of recruiter skills that are going to be needed in this AI-enabled future. I've been casting around for people to talk about this for a long time, but I randomly bumped into Tom at an event a couple of months or so ago. And of course, Tom is the global recruiting strategy director at Accenture. So who else to speak about this than you? So thanks very much for coming on the show, Tom. Why don't you quickly intro yourself? Like quickly, who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, so relatively accurate. So global recruiting end-to-end strategy lead for Accenture. And really what that means is I sit within a global recruiting COE and I look at how we are going to move our recruiting into the world of agentic. And it's a role I've been in probably for about 2 or 3 months now. So we are really kind of at the beginning of our journey. I mean, we've done some work already around, as you might expect, AI automation, dipping our toes into agentic. For us, it's really kind of a question of scalability, right? Because as an organization, we receive 6, 7 million applications a year. We hire 140,000 people a year or so. It's a very, as a result of that, complex organization, and comes with pretty significant challenges that we need to account for. So yeah, it's going to be a challenging next few months in terms of getting into it.
Fantastic stuff, Tom. And just to be clear, this so a great deal of your current work is internally focused, trying to figure out how Accenture are going to maintain the quality of hiring, given the volume of people you're recruiting, but also making sure that you're doing so in making best use of all the tools. That you've got to make sure you're making use of these new techniques to find the types of people that you're looking to hire. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's to a certain extent a form of reimagining of how we do recruiting. It's not trying to necessarily duplicate what we've done before. It's trying to explore how might we do things better and differently. What are some of those agentic enablers that might help us to do things better that we've not been able to do before? How can it help to unlock new services, tools, value for Accenture?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, And where do we still require human intervention? That's the big question, right? And one of the things that I've been responsible for and still have responsibility for is how we measure our experiences across our candidates, across our recruiters, across our hiring managers, pulsing our candidates throughout their hiring journeys. We've got hundreds of thousands of data points which point towards the human experience being the peak of candidate experience at Accenture. So how do we protect that, and how do we make sure that that is at the heart of our design? And the future is one of our challenges. Yeah.
Super interesting. And this goes into AI first versus human centric. I mean, I've kind of exaggerated the competition between these two philosophies. I don't think they're necessarily butting heads directly, but they are coming from a slightly different sort of original root. And I do wonder whether there will be tension between them. So it'd be interesting to see how Accenture explores this angle. Very interesting indeed as well. Guys, we're going to go straight into this conversation. Obviously, loads to talk about, but before we do, let's just make sure audio and visual is fine. I see a bunch of people in the chat here, so let me know whether you can see myself and Tom Sayer on screen, and you can hear and see us both. Just let us know in the comments there. We are also live streaming this on LinkedIn, as you might imagine. I'm doing this. Rob Walker's doing this. I believe Ellie is doing this as well. If you're watching this on LinkedIn or any of those LinkedIn's, and you can hear and see me okay, do let me know in the comments whether that is fine. Okay, it looks like people are listening. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Karina. All good. Okay, we have to also thank our sponsors, by the way, because we can't do Brainfood Live without the company sponsoring Brainfood every week. And this week it's one of our new favorites coming out of Sweden. What a fantastic to see recruitment technology companies have success coming out of the Nordics. This is one of the up and coming ATSs out there in the market. I hear them in the game whenever people are talking about upgrading ATS. It is, of course, Team Taylor. Team Taylor, very well reputed, particularly for user experience, particularly for employer branding. They're a kind of a new gen ATS, which you might need to take a look at if you're looking to upgrade your core platform. Share the link in the chat there, folks. Make sure you check them out. They should be part of your thinking if you're reviewing your core system. Okay, cool. Let's get into this, Tom. You've been given a brief very recently, so let's just go right back then. When you were interviewing for this job, what did they say they wanted from you? Was there like clear things that they said, Tom, we need you to do this? And what are those things?
I guess the evolution of this happened in a slightly different way. And I say evolution because previously my responsibilities have been to oversee assessments, experience, and training. That's kind of an eclectic mix, I guess, thrown together at a global level. But I think from that, one of the things that's become very clear to us is we've really kind of dived into assessments transformation over the last few years and really looked at how we use assessments, digital assessments, due to the volumes of candidates we get. How can we make sure that we get better, more accurate ways of understanding skills, matching those to opportunities, and of course, how we use more digital assessments to drive efficiency as well. What we discovered is that we had still large parts of our organization running skills interviews, where actually, digital assessment is a far more accurate and efficient enabler for us to use in those sorts of spaces. So we took some time really understanding what the opportunity is, from country to country, from market to market, across our service lines. Some pretty extensive work. As you might imagine, what we discovered is that we work with dozens and dozens and dozens of vendors, and we did a lot of rationalization around consolidating use cases for vendors. You don't necessarily need more than one or two tech vendors in any space for tech skills hiring, for example. So we did a lot of that, but I think as a result of that, we realized that there is an opportunity to tie those to more agentic services. So I think one of the things that we've got to ensure that we're doing, and one of the big challenges I think that we've got to come to, is understand how we define, at role level, what predicts success, how do we identify those skills and behaviors, how do we validate those skills and behaviors so that we can, from the top of the funnel, start to make screen in, screen out decisions. Now, the challenge is, of course, with AI, if it's an AI driven score around some of that sort of stuff, then when it comes to regulation and compliance, there's huge challenges around doing that. You need a human in the loop. So I think the way to, one of the things you've got to try and do is delineate the automation and the assessment from the AI activity, right? We're not going to use AI to necessarily score someone's capability. That needs to be done through fully validated job analysis, through an assessment that could be driven by an automation, but certainly not scored necessarily by AI and made by AI recommendation. Those cut scores have got to be manually created. Um, but I think it's this work around assessments that really kind of opened our eyes to the opportunity when it came to driving efficiency, speed, time, time cost quality, kind of like the kind of the holy trinity of recruiting in that sense. That's what drove us to understanding the opportunity, and really it was about putting that in front of more people at a local level and a global level to say, here's the opportunity that we can use as a platform to drive what we're kind of calling more frictionless recruiting. So that was, I think, the genesis of it.
Let me put my cynic's hat on, Tom, and say this. Really interesting to see what you're sort of how you're sort of what you're talking about. So much of the recruitment in Accenture is still human skills-based analysis. So in other words, a human being interviewing another human being and try and figure out whether they got the skills to fit into what you're looking to do in Accenture. That, of course, is super expensive, because those people doing the interviews are actually billing consultants, right? So it's not just the normal. It's very clear in the PS model that if you pull people out of sort of paid work, there's the double cost to that because they're not getting on site and doing work, and here you are doing interviews, and this could be hugely expensive resource. So you can't do that. So number one, very clear need to make that more efficient, and it seems that there's confidence in the AI to score and assess better, but the caution is more driven by the need to stay compliant. So, would it be fair to say that Accenture have more faith in the machine making those assessments than just pure play human being? No.
No, no, I think it's making sure the AI doesn't do the scoring. It's making sure that we're using assessments probably in the more traditional sense. So really understanding through the job analysis what are the skills and behaviors that we're anchoring to, making sure during that job analysis process we are surveying, our employees to make sure we've got proper benchmarks, making sure that employee base is going through those assessments so that we're able to establish a cut score. And that is really what gives us the legally defensible criteria to make those screen in, screen out decisions. So it's not really AI doing the scoring in that sense. The AI is probably something that would be, and this is still to be defined, driving the agents on top, which are providing the service, right? It's not actually making a decision, a screen in, screen out decision, because I think that's where we potentially run into issues of regulation and compliance.
Really, really interesting, Tom. This is educational as I knew it would be. And by the way, I'm going to be in deep water speaking to Tom on this because this is I'm kind of pretty much like an ignoramus here. But basically, as I understand it, the human beings within Accenture are going to come up with a way to score sort of against the job. So you have a job or a family of jobs, and you're going to say, you know what, these are the skills we need, these are the attributes we need, the behaviors, etc. This is what we're going to have. Where artificial intelligence comes in, the cut score is determined by human beings. Where artificial intelligence comes in is simply it's going to make it more efficient for candidates to fall into those two buckets. It's not making a decision per se. It's
Yeah,
kind of just
yeah, I think that's right. I think also, when we look at running a job analysis process, it can take anywhere between sort of 4 and 12 weeks, depending upon the scale of what you're doing. That's not scalable. We need, and this is a real opportunity for AI to help run job analysis a lot quicker so that we've got that validated criteria anchored to assessment. So the skills and behaviors are outlined. I think at the moment, the gap is around if you're going to raise a requisition, um, how do we get to some form of validated assessment that's anchored to the skills and behaviors you've identified as quickly as possible? At the moment, that's a 4 week, 12-week process, whatever it might be, going through the process I've outlined. Just not scalable, right? Just not scalable and just not agile enough to meet demand. So I think the opportunity, and one of the things we're exploring, is how do we do that much quicker, and how might we use AI to actually run that much quicker, because that's a place where it can do the data crunching, it can join dots far faster than humans are able to do it. So that's where AI can potentially add a huge amount of value. So that is one of the avenues, one of the kind of the big rocks that we're looking at from a scalability perspective.
Are you going to buy products out there in the market, or what is the resource availability within Accenture to build? So I think
We
that's a
do
big
build.
decision for. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, we do build. We do build some products ourselves. It really depends upon the maturity of the products in the market. I think because of our scale and complexity, um, sometimes we see products that look great, fantastic products that we'd love to use. It's just, can we apply that product to the scale of Accenture? That tends to be the main barrier when it comes to seeing some of the more innovative products. But that's also where, if we do determine that there's a gap in the market, either there isn't a vendor that has an offering in that space, or we don't find a kind of an enterprise grade vendor that can support us on something, then that's where we would look to build ourselves. I think in this instance, it's TBC. Um, so, we're still, as I said, in early stages of looking at what we need to do and what we need to prioritize. And to a certain extent, I speak from my personal point of view rather than Accenture point of view on where I think some of those challenges are.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Skills assessment. Let's dive into this. What is the point in doing a skills assessment when artificial intelligence kind of like does a lot of the skills kind of backfilling? Skills is, in my opinion, quite closely tied to a task. So let's say you need a superstar Excel person. Great. Previously, that was something you might screen for, etc., etc. Now, like GPTs are built into Excel. Like I can simply speak English to it and it'll produce pivot tables or whatever I need it to do. What's the point in assessing for skills? Have I got it wrong? What are you assessing for when AI actually is going to replicate or actually, substitute a lot of the human things that we previously were placed high value on?
I think that's a great question. I think it's an evolving space. I think when I specifically talk about skills with Accenture, it will be more sort of hard tech skills. So full stack Java engineers, Python engineers, stuff like that, right? At present, we're still assessing those through tech assessments. So those kind of skills, we still kind of hard tech assessments that we look at. Um, but I think there is a category of skills, and you could probably put software developers into this that are evolving, right? The skills themselves are evolving, and what you do within those roles is evolving. Code review, stuff like that. So I think the way in which we evaluate them, those skills, has got to evolve. Of course, there's also a big discussion around the use of AI in assessment, and whether what you allow candidates to use, what you don't allow candidates to use. That's where we want to work with assessment vendors on understanding what is the most forward-thinking way of including these tools within those assessments in a controlled environment, so we can understand how they're using those tools. Again, I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of Accenture from an Accenture point of view on this, but I think that we've really got to understand how people are working with technology. We give today within Accenture everyone access to Copilot. Amethyst is our own in-house generative AI product, and we expect our employees to work with these products day in, day out. So why would you want to assess someone without access to those sorts of products? So yeah, it's certainly an evolving piece that we need to make sure we're as head of as possible, if that's possible in today's environment.
No, you need to keep us updated on this because, as you say, everyone's wrestling with this idea. Like, we wanna I don't see any organization that's like actively hostile to AI literacy. Like we want candidates that know how to do this. Of course, it makes absolute sense. And in fact, we've got a Brain Food Live coming up in a couple of weeks on the 4th of July, I believe, where we're going to say, okay, how do you actually assess for AI literacy? Is there a trait or an attribute, or if you're interviewing someone, do you give them a test? Do we get together and in front of a computer and start prompting away? Like, how do we assess for it at scale? That's another thing we need to think about. Yet at the same time, we should be very careful about just accepting AI generated output as evidence of the capability of that person,
Yeah.
because there may be a big gap between what this person can output in a very fixed context compared to an undefined context where we need this individual. I actually get this a lot from people who are hiring technical people, actually, Tom, where they're complaining that, hey, these engineers look amazing on the flying through the coding skills assessment and all the rest of it, and I get them in front of a conversation, I speak to them, and they're actually very disappointed because they don't know the fundamentals, quote unquote. So we might be in a situation where we have a generation of people that have come through um, the professional educational system, where they haven't worked it out without AI, so they're overly dependent on AI, so they don't have the fundamental skills. So, folks, just to give you a very prosaic example, imagine it's a language exam. So I try to assess someone in written English or whatever. I can chat GBT it back and it's perfect. Great. I think that's brilliant. I need brilliant written English. But actually, when I go and interview the person, they have a low standard of English, let's say, and I suddenly think, hang on, I actually need someone who really does know English, not just knows how to prompt chat GBT. So that's the challenge of tech, and I think it will continue to be challenged with all other skills. How do we, is the output the only thing that's important, or is the fundamental important? And if it's fundamental, then what the heck are we assessing for? Because it seems to me we're only assessing for output. Any thoughts on that
Yeah.
sort of conundrum, Tom?
I think it calls for I think that's where the approach to how you evaluate a candidate needs to be thought through end to end. I think at the moment one of the challenges is, and I think it stems onto what are we looking for in our future recruiting organization. I think one of those things is around systems thinking. We need people who can think, I think, a little bit more end to end, because I think, in the old fashioned way of looking at recruiting, it's a CV review, it's then an assessment, an interview, whatever it might be, in terms of that process that gets put together. And of course, every single organization is going to differ in terms of what their process look like. Um, how joined up is it in terms of, again, going back to that kind of the concept of doing a job analysis right at the beginning? What are the skills? What predicts success in this role? What are the skills? What are the behaviors? Really, what is it that you're looking for? And then how do you create an end-to-end process that's going to identify that person? It's not just one single assessment like a coding assessment. Do we need to understand learning agility? Do we need to have cognitive performance? And then how do those assessments come together to give a holistic view of that candidate and a holistic match to what good looks like in this role? So I think that needs to be thoughtfully developed, because I think all too often, in my experience in 20 years of recruiting, sometimes people see a battery of assessments put together because they think it's the right thing to do. We need to put them through a cognitive assessment. We need to put them through a technical, whatever it might be. But what is the holistic output of that? How does that come together to create a holistic view of the candidate's match against what you're looking for in predictive success? So I think that piece needs to be a bit more joined up, and hopefully that's one way of kind of navigating through kind of what you've identified.
Yeah, I wonder whether the assessment aspect of recruitment generally is going to be just be a bigger slice of the time distribution pie, if I can use that horrible phrase. But if you imagine a recruiter, you've got a pie of time, where you distributing your time. Right now, assessments is probably quite low because we'd probably hit them with an automated assessment, right, with quick screen into an assessment. Someone else does that. But I wonder whether this kind of will expand over time because, as you say, like it becomes more
Yeah,
complicated to understand what the person offers. Are they just a meat vehicle typing into a keyboard prompting the AI? In which
mm,
case, we actually just getting the AI rather than the human is completely fungible. Or
yeah,
do we want something else? What, and if it's something else, then what is that thing? Very pertinent for early entry, Tom, which of course Accenture have been probably one of the iconic employers of early entry talent, moving them through. It's always been long-term pipelining and, the brand of Accenture and indeed a lot of the other PS competitors out there, very, very strong in early career entry. And because everyone you're bringing in, you're growing and the potentially fee earning people for you guys. There's been a conversation coming out in the industry to say, you know what, the career ladder, the bottom rungs of the career ladder is getting kicked away because actually AI can replicate a lot of the productive output that we would get from a graduate of 1 or 2 years experience. We're kind of recognizing that maybe the first 1 or 2 years of anybody's professional career was generally being an office gopher. You were the research assistant to someone senior. You were the person putting together a bunch of slides. You were, you know, doing the all bits and bobs of tasks. That was just basically information processing, information transformation. Okay, AI does all that now. So, what's your take on taking the career ladder away from younger people? Do you think that's a legitimate problem? And has that conversation occurred within Accenture at all in terms of what we as employers need to be doing?
Yeah, so I think to begin with, yeah, it's something we're absolutely aware of. To be honest with you, it's not really been my lane. So it's not something I'm close to in terms of how we're going to go and solve for that. But I think the impact of it is clear on future leaders across our organization. It's a critical pathway to creating future leaders, future managers. If you start eroding that, then where's your talent coming from? To your point, his Accenture is classically, I think, prided itself on bringing through talent, you know, that career track through to partner within the consulting and strategy workforces in particular, has always been famous for that. Um, I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you. We know it's a challenge. We know it's a problem. I can't speak to how much that impacts Accenture at the moment in terms of our early talent strategy. I'm not close enough to it, but yeah, it's something that I've heard of our leaders being aware of, and I think it's something that everyone is trying to solve for sure. Yeah.
There's a tension, isn't there? And I don't think any organization it's almost a prisoner's dilemma scenario because every organization, of course, is there to make profit. We live in an economic system where it's capitalist competition, so every organization needs to be efficient. Suddenly, we find, one of the ways to be most efficient is to apply artificial intelligence and automate a lot of the low value work. We call it very clearly low value work. Then it suddenly turns out the low value work has a dual purpose, which is not only for the value work to be completed, but also as a training ground for the next generation of talent.
Yeah.
And so we've got this like long and short horizon that is in competition. The short horizon is okay, automate everything away. I can go back to my boss and say, look, my function is being super productive. Look at all the productivity gains. But from the unit, if the unit of analysis is the company, you're eroding the future talent and future leadership of your organization because you're just literally not hiring the younger people anymore. Folks, quick
Yeah.
question to you in the audience watching this. Have you in your organization have you had this conversation? What we have had is, do more with less. We all know that that's been the pressure the last 2, 3 years. We all have had that conversation. We're all applying AI to do more with less. But have you had the internal conversation to say, hey, we're kind of eroding the future talent force of our company because where are the future leaders going to come from if we're actually going to drain that early entry talent pool down? Quick prediction for you. Let me know in the comments, by the way, where you're at with this. Tom, I'll give you a quick prediction. I believe the companies will not solve this on their own because Prisoner's Dilemma will roll out. I think government will mandate companies to recruit early entry. They'll just put a quota on it and say 5% of your employee base every year has to be first jobbers, 21 university graduates, 18-year-old, whatever it is. It'll be like I don't know whether you follow the Scottish Premier League because I know you went to St Andrews, Tom. I didn't realize that. You and me just missed each other in terms of being alumni. But anyway, do you remember when Scots Premier League started saying, okay, within the squad you needed 5 players that were eligible for the Scottish national team? And
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a hard quota. That's a DEI quota, folks. Because those players may not have been as good as what could have been captured by the club, but the wider interest of the country was to say we need to grow this talent. I think legislation is going to roll out, and companies are going to have to do it, which I endorse, to be honest. But anyway, that's
Yeah.
a prediction for the future. Catch me if on this if I'm wrong. Okay, um, talk about the recruiter skills profile, Tom. We're talking about hiring and changing the recruiting structure within Accenture. There's a number of ways that's going to happen. Does that change the profile of recruiters that we're looking for? I would imagine, let's say, 10 years or so ago, probably the primary value that recruiters had was actually sourcing candidates. Expert finders of talent that others couldn't find. Maybe your ability to then, engage with them and bring them into fore. I think that's still high value. But hey, is that going to change? Like, well, how does AI change the skills profile of recruiters? What are your thoughts on this, Tom?
Yes, it does. It does. I think, I mean, if I go back thinking about recruiters and recruiter profiles of the past, and I'm, 20 plus year career here, I kind of think about this picture of recruiters being people with incredibly good organizational skills, good memories, good relationship skills, those sorts of things. Um, I don't think you need to be organized in the future. I think agents are going to organize you, right? So I think we're not looking for good, well organized people. We're not looking for people who are administrators who are driving tasks. Um, I do think there's a kind of a sense of the TA function will become what you want it to become, in a sense. I think, but what I mean by that is, we've spoken for a number of years as an industry, I guess, about transactional versus strategic TA. And I think that the rise of agentic sharpens that conversation a bit more, because if you are not making that transition to being more strategic as a TA function, then you'll become automated, because the transactional value um, will be diminished by the automation and the opportunity to place AI in there to perform tasks and services. So I think what it prompts is in my mind, I kind of group it into themes of skills that we'd probably see a development of. One of them really is around that commercial leader mindset. So I think that one group of skills or one theme would be around business advisors, and that's how do you get more aligned to your business strategy and your business outcomes, and how do you have people in roles who are able to manage the TA strategy such that we talk in terms of business outcomes and things like revenue rather than bums on seats and stuff like that. And I think that more and more TA functions are operating like that. But I think that pivot is going to be driven a lot by AI. I think that's going to drive this divide between transactional and strategic TA. It's going to sharpen that a little bit more. So one group of roles I would say is around that commercial TA, that business advisory TA. Another group of roles, and I don't think these are exclusive, mutually exclusive. I think there's overlap between them. Is around that kind of talent orchestration. I think a widening of the roles that we perform across TA overlaps with things like learning and development, overlaps with talent strategy, those sorts of areas as well. I think right at the top of this discussion, we talked about feedback. We talked about how AI unlocks the ability to deliver feedback at scale, particularly if you've been through digital assessments, the insights that we get through that, the insights we get through, interview co-pilots. We're now going to be awash with insights. How do we then provide to a candidate more of a career service? 99% of people who apply to us, we do not hire. But from an experience perspective, from a corporate citizen perspective, how do we actually then get better at providing to those people the insights they need to develop, the learning they need to develop? For some organizations, that's not going to be important. To other organizations, perhaps more at enterprise level, it is seen as kind of a CSR activity. It's being part of the community. It's making sure that your candidates are provided, particularly if at the top of the funnel, we are going to be doing a little bit more around asking them to engage a little bit more deeply, a little bit more richly with us as an organization, to understand more about them, to provide them with better matches. what's the quid pro quo? What are we going to give back to candidates? And I think that's probably more in the area of that kind of um, in that feedback, that learning, that development. And so I think that talent orchestration role is helping to enable that. And to your point again, right at the top when we started talking, right? I think there are some organizations that are going to facilitate that through humans, and some organizations that would be more comfortable facilitating that through chatbots, AI, agents, so on and so forth. Um, and then I think the third group of roles, or the third theme, is really around, as I've mentioned already, this kind of this systems thinking. I think if you go back to almost kind of first principles about what recruiting is, it's about how do you find talent, how do you evaluate talent, and of course there is the hire and onboarding piece as well. But I think in its fundamental piece, it's finding talent, evaluating talent, and so the systems thinking has got to bring those two things together. And I think that to the point about assessments earlier on, I don't necessarily think assessments is at the core of how we build out a talent ecosystem. It's what I would call evaluation. Evaluation is how we start to identify what good looks like in the beginning, how we then decide we screen for that, how we assess for that, and how we interview that. Evaluation is how you bring that all together, and I think that requires kind of systems thinking. Um, and I think that recruiters will probably need to get a little bit more into the weeds and into the depths of assessment science, right? And how we evaluate candidates. I think there are organizations and the recruiters are already fantastic at that. But I think that standard will be elevated as we look to scale in a robust and legally defensive way, using more technology and AI to help support decision making and in some instances screen in, screen out candidates.
Yeah, really interesting. We've got a bunch of fantastic comments here as well in the chat. Keep them coming, folks. Really enjoy what I'm seeing here. Sean Wilkes, I just want to raise this. Influencers and relationship builders. I think those have always been skills within the TA function, but I think even more so as we go forward are going to be emphasized. Or potentially when we're recruiting for new talent, we'll be looking for people with those skills. And yeah, maybe I love when you say the organizational skills would be thrown out the window. I probably wouldn't be as aggressive as that, Tom, but I do get the sense, as you say, someone who's super organized, able to do all the tasks and complete tasks and drive task completion, maybe that's going to be devalued as a core skill across all sort of functions. Because the system is going to do those things for you. And there may be some other things that will take the place. Folks, if you have any specific questions you want to ask Tom, please use the Q&A feature on the chat function. The reason why we want to go there is, by the way, 4, 5, or 6 people have already done that, is because I'm going to lose track of the chat, and I don't want that to happen. Artyomas, by the way, really appreciate the devil's advocate sort of point, and I want to raise this one, so please don't feel afraid to say the tough things that need to be said. I want to read out Artyom's quote here. Isn't AI removing the conversation whatsoever if TA today is not widely regarded as a strategic function anyway? So in other words, if AI removes the transactional element, is everyone just going to be going on without TA? So what if fundamentally TA is transactional? Like we always say, hey, we want to be strategic, we want to be this, and this. Hasn't happened for 25 years, 30 years or so. Is there actually a fundamental reason why that is? Because it is just a transactional job. It is about taking a rec and executing, delivering that. And the strategy is the business. Like we're not in that. We're supporting the business. Thoughts on this, Tom?
Yeah, I think through one lens it absolutely is. Through another lens it absolutely isn't. It depends which way you're looking at it. Like I think, how are you working with your business to deliver outcomes? I think that you could take two TA teams and run them side by side in A/B test, and you get very different outcomes. So is it transactional, or is it actually adding business value? And that would depend upon the outcomes of that A/B test, right? And I think that um, this is where you kind of I think TA teams need to almost manifest their destiny a little bit, because I think that if you work with a business to say, okay, this year we're going to add X million to the bottom line by disrupting competitors over here, by bringing in this talent over here, etc. And we're going to do it earlier than forecast, whatever it might be, which allows us to win additional business opportunities. Then you are a true business partner and adding value to the bottom line of the business. And I think that's I think the value that TA can operate. And I think that in order to achieve that, you've got to be more than a transactional function.
I love the term. Well, I don't love the term manifest destiny, given its kind of
So
yeah, extraordinary sort of privilege type of connotations, but it is about manifesting the destiny. I think you're right. It's like TA may be in that fork in the road situation. Like, what do you want to be in future? Because the future is now being made. And if you want to be transactional, stay that way. I think that's fine. You're probably still going to have some operators in a completely AI-enabled world, which will still be pushing the buttons and operating the machine, but it's going to be a truncated function, and you know there won't be a lot of people doing that. It's literally someone who's observe. I can just see the assembly line type scenario, like one person observing a bunch of machines doing everything. Or do you move into a strategic function, which where you're more like a talent scout or a genuine talent acquisition? I'll pull it back to a football analogy. It's like, are you a person that simply pulls in players based on an instruction, or do you have a talent recruitment strategy where you are actually doing the recruitment, you're doing the assessment, and you're bringing talent into the organization that the coaches then develop? So you have a different function that does the TA compared to just a service arm to the business. So yeah, very, very interesting to see where we're at. By the way, talent, at least at the very elite edge, remains hugely significant. I don't know whether you saw this, Tom, about Mark Zuckerberg like directly getting into recruitment. Have you have
yeah,
you have you read this last week or two?
yeah,
So
yeah,
so apparently, if you're not aware, folks, apparently Mark Zuckerberg is directly getting involved in sourcing and outreach. Would you believe? But he's targeting like the elite AI kind of research people that work for direct competitors and offering an outrageous sign-on. But we're talking 100 million to come on board to join Meta. I think three open AI engineers have accepted so far. So we're talking more than life-changing. This is generational changing type of money. And Mark Zuckerberg's doing a direct recruiting, so that's recruiting, isn't it? So it's right there. Okay, cool, folks. Final thing, we always do this in the middle of every session. We've got 20 more minutes with Tom before I've got to let him go. But we want to make sure conversations of this type continue, even though Brainfood has to come off air at some point. So do make sure you connect with everyone else who's taking part in this conversation. Way to do that, very straightforward. Grab your LinkedIn URL, share it in the chat stream if you're watching this on Crowdcast, and connect to everyone who has done the same. And if you're watching this on any of the LinkedIns, go ahead and do the same thing. The bottom line is we've got hundreds of people watching this. You know, if 10% of everyone does this, you're going to have 100 cool connections to reconnect with and boost your network intelligence, which, by the way, I think is another thing which I believe the future recruiter is going to need. Like, we already have extensive networks, but perhaps the very elite recruiters going forward will have just super deep networks within a certain vertical so that they know everyone by name. They've got their people on direct message. They're able to basically the almost it goes back full circle. It's almost like they have the black book, and that gives them the capability that someone who is spending on ads can't get, because interaction and engagement with that elite talent is the next big problem. It's not about finding people. AI might be able to do that, but I don't know the last time anybody responded, or you responded to an AI generated message. Probably we're starting to tune ourselves out of that so that we can see, oh, AI generated, with deleting. But if someone messages you that is a known person to you in the industry, you're going to treat them almost like, okay, I better take this call because I don't know what the future might be. So that type of recruiter, I think, is going to be premium. Um, has,
yeah.
has it affected how Accenture recruits recruiters? Like, what is this is a bit meta, so to say, but like, has any of this started to percolate down to how Accenture are hiring recruiters, or is that sort of a little bit down the pipeline as of yet?
Yeah, it's a bit down the pipeline from where we are at the moment, to be honest with you. As I mentioned, it's something that we're diving into at the moment. We are running a few experiments in both India and the US at the moment, what we call frictionless hiring, and we are going to see what the potential impacts on running those processes is on the work that our recruiters do. So we're learning at the moment and experimenting to understand what those kind of impacts look like. So yeah, it hasn't changed the way we hire quite yet.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Um, Talk to us about sort of talent in context. I think a lot of the problems we have, a lot of the disputes we have about who is what or what is the best tool, what is the best technique, is that we often like abstract the individual and assume that that's an individual that could be deployable in any circumstance, in any scenario. Whereas in fact, working in context with other people, specifically certain specific teams, actually might determine whether a person is a good or bad hire from there. Um, is that something that you think? I guess I'm trying to put it in plain language. Are we rehabilitating cultural fit, team fit? Is that something that's a conversation that's floated around in Accenture, or is it still a case of actually no, we do want sort of modular talent that can operate across teams?
It's a great question. I don't think the idea or the question around team fit, cultural fit is one that we are exploring at the moment. Um, it's it is part of, if I look at that evaluation framework I mentioned, it is something that features on that interview. We still want to make sure at the end of whatever process it is, you do, of course, meet a human. We're not going to go end to end completely without human interaction. You still need to be the business. Candidates are telling us, as I mentioned earlier on from our experience data, right? They peak of the experience is meeting people, and people still work for people. They don't work for machines yet. So they're going to want to meet their team, and the team's going to want to meet them. So I honestly, in terms of that evaluation process at the moment, that sits within that interview sphere. Um, I think it absolutely is probably part of the evaluation process when I talked about the holistic view of an individual. When we look at their skills, we look at their behaviors, we look at that team fit piece as well. 100% that could be part of the evaluation criteria. Harder to capture that from a job analysis up front, to be honest with you. That's not something you're going to screen in, screen out on. It's going to be an input decision. But I think it's a good question and probably not one we've explored enough quite yet, to be honest with you.
Mm, very, very interesting. Um, in terms of the shape of how Accenture are doing it now and where you think it might be in 12 months' time, can you give us just a general throwaway look? This is how the funnel looks currently for recruiting talent in Accenture. Nothing sort of confidential, of course, Tom, but
Yeah,
how does it look?
I think Accenture is such a vast place. You've got to be quite specific about where in Accenture, both in terms of country and service line, and and practices and skills and stuff like that. Because the way we hire entry level talent is very different from the way we hire experienced hires or MDs, executive hiring. That looks different across different countries. And then we've got our service lines. And within those service lines, of course, the way in which you go and hire tech skills in tech delivery centers, operations delivery centers, very, very different from how you go out hiring for strategy and consulting roles. So it's very hard to make a generalization, even within Accenture, about what does hiring look like. What I would say is that where we're kind of starting is where the volume is. So we're going for bang for buck. So when I talk about running experiments, that's around tech hiring, because of course I think within tech hiring it's quite easy to be, or it's easier I should say, to be objective about the hard skills you need to be able to do those jobs. So that's where the opportunity is to drive as much automation as possible, to use really robust assessments based upon these job analyses, those sorts of things. So I think that's one of the first areas we're targeting, because it's going to give us the biggest return in terms of the volume, getting through the volume of candidates and applicants that we get. So I'd say within that space, what it looks like is, candidates applying to Accenture. I would say it's, previous to that, it's having a very clear view of what good looks like in those roles. Measuring quality of hire is something that we've recently, we've spent a long time thinking about how we measure quality of hire. There's so many different ways that organizations do it, so many different types of data point. We spent about 12 months thinking about quality of hire. That's going to be fundamental to us in understanding how much of this is working in the future. Are these assessments helping us to identify better quality and hire? So that is something that we're deploying pretty much at the moment to the month. And so in a year's time, we're going to have a huge amount of data on, is this working? Are we starting to move the needle in terms of quality? But to go back to it, so I think it's that job analysis process. It's having a really robust view of what good looks like within these roles. Do we have in a year's time a mechanism that can help us do that super fast, an agentic way of identifying, predictive performance and skills and behaviors that then help us to effectively automate that kind of assessment flow. So, what is it we need to screen for? What is it we need to assess for? And then how do we roll those insights up and deliver those to a hiring manager? So when it comes to the interview phases, whether that be one interview or two interview, they've got the right insights to help inform them, have a great discussion around that talent and that profile that candidate's got. I would say that is what we're looking to deliver within the next 12 months. And there's a lot of work there because I'm not quite sure whether the enablers actually exist in the market at enterprise level to help deliver that at the scale
Yeah,
at which we're
yeah.
looking to do. But that's where we're making our, when I talk about the pilots that we're doing at the moment or the kind of the experiments we're doing within market, it's centered around that. So the core is around that.
Yeah, really good. So again, what I'm hearing from on this is that the early interactions from an applicant coming in on the tech side, we're gonna probably have some sort of agentic interviewer going on, so an automated interview, capture some information on that. Maybe then there's some sort of a tech assessment as per normal, and the collection of that data is then presented to a human, or perhaps it will be, a further a different AI might screen that, but at some stage of that screening, a human being will review a candidate's gone through those processes, and then a one-to-one, probably a Zoom call would be the next phase.
Yeah, I think you've got it. I think the screening piece is really interesting, right? I think that how do we screen for those sorts of skills at the top of the funnel? I think for me is the big question at the moment. And as you say,
Yeah.
part of that could be covered by voice agent. Whether that's just confirming role specifics around location, shift work, whatever it might be. Other parts of it. At Accenture, one of our peculiarities, which no doubt isn't exclusive to Accenture, but we have huge and heavy compliance that we must follow around applicants. So trying to automate and get agentic around how we do those compliance checks, around rehire checks, around client hiring restrictions, all this kind of stuff that we typically have to go through. At the moment, it's very manual. How do we infuse agents in that space so that the whole thing can be super fast, and help us within that screening process get through people to assessments is a big part of what we've also got to solve for.
That's brilliant. I mean, obviously that's a service line as well for you guys. I mean, because of your compliance requirements, if you're able to produce kind of an AI powered efficient system to recruit against quality of hire at scale, etc., with all of those that is compliant to international global scenario, that's obviously something of huge interest to any organization. I think that might be interested in moving along those lines. So I think there's a good reason to sort of get good at this, I guess, from that
Yeah.
perspective. Okay, good stuff. Folks, let's go to questions. We've got a bunch of things being asked here, so let's just go with it. I'm going to just go in order. So Denise, by the way, any questions you have, just keep firing them in. I'm going to read them out. So Denise has said, okay, with AI becoming more prevalent in recruiting, which skills do you think will be most valued in recruiter profiles next 5 years? Analytical skills or empathy, we kind of did touch on that, but Denise has kind of given us like a black or white there. So where are you going with the analytic skills versus empathy, Tom?
Well, I've just seen a Glenn Caffrey video where he says that AI are better at empathy than humans. So maybe it's not empathy. AI is better at analytical skills as well. So I don't know, maybe we're out in both of those types. I think AI is less good than humans at being unreasonable. So maybe it's the unreasonable pieces. And I say that only half tongue in cheek. I think that one of the problems we've got to solve is how do we get, I mentioned the feedback piece already, right? I think that no matter how well you do that rejection piece, people take it personally, and how do you deliver that better? And I think that that's where human plus machine, if you want to put it that way, could be a very powerful proposition, because if you've got more objective assessments, more objective criteria, and better quality feedback that you can share with candidates. That being delivered by a human, I think, has got real value and power to it. Far more so at the moment where it's feedback can be scattered, it can be of poor quality, comes across as subjective, and that just fuels the whole feeling of it being a bit more personal than it should be. Um, I mean, I think to come back to the question though, I do think analytical skills. When we think about the role of recruiters in the next 5 years, particularly if it's going to be around the evaluation process, or to your point, Han, talking about how we have kind of super sources in some spaces, the ability to be analytical about looking at because I think the AI is going to serve to us data and decisions, and it's going to be analytical skills that help you to make those decisions off the back of it. You're also going to have to think about how you orchestrate agents and how you orchestrate, particularly in this field of assessments, how you build those assessments, how you orchestrate, and how you start to think about that from a responsible AI perspective, right? So how are you going to run your adverse impact studies? How are you going to run construct validity? How are you going to do these things? A lot of them are quite sciencey, and that traditionally hasn't been a space in which recruiters have been
Mm.
operating. So analytical skills will have to develop in order for recruiters to play the role of orchestrator across these systems to ensure that they are being managed appropriately, fairly, without adverse impact, and that they're accurate, they're predictive, right? So I definitely see analytical skills being developed. And there's an argument to say empathy as well. I don't think it is either or. I think empathy is something that will overlay the data, which is part of those conversations that you have with both the business and your candidates.
Yeah, really good. And the talent orchestration, I think, is a really nice term to talk about sort of how that future will look. We're going to be, basically managing a bunch of AI agents that are doing this operational work. Who is doing the training of these agents? Who is doing the interventions, the triages? How do you make sure the agents are tuned such that it works to your organization? Because it may not work, with in a different place. We
Yeah.
may even see a world where recruiters carry agents around with them. I wonder whether that's a future, where in the same way we bring our networks to an organization, it's kind of unspoken, but if I was to hire Tom, Tom is going to bring a bunch of people that he knows in his. I know that's a value that we probably are not calculating, but we do know it's there. We bring them in. Do we have the same relationship with agents that a person might have? So, super interesting. Okay, let's power through. We've got this question from Shrini. Shrini says Microsoft has partnership with Accenture on M65, Azure, etc. We know this. How is Tom seeing recruiters managing agents that are designed for the HR function? I guess this is answered the question in talent orchestration, isn't it? Or do you have anything to add to that question, Tom?
How are we managing agents designed for the HR function? Yeah, so how are we managing the agents rather than using them? We're managing them through predominantly our responsible AI function. So we're very lucky in the sense that I work quite closely with both the responsible AI and responsible assessment function. You cannot deploy into Accenture a tool that uses AI without it going through a responsible AI review. And that is quite an extensive and robust view that they do, where they peer deeply into the tool to understand how it works. Is it explainable? They conduct studies, as I said, around adverse impact, around construct validity, is it predictive, all this kind of stuff. So we're very well supported at Accenture by these teams who run that for AI, and as I said, for responsible AI as well. So if we want to deploy an assessment, again, that team will help us run the job analysis. They'll help us run the assessment bill, designing out what the cut score should be, all these sorts of things. So we're very fortunate. We've got those teams that support us. But I do think that looking at those teams, they are still relatively small, even within Accenture. Those teams, and right
Mm.
now they've got their work cut out, right? Because there's a queue of AI tools that everyone wants to use across the organization, that they need to work their way through. And that's where I think you're going to start to see the skills that exist within that team start to trickle down into other teams because they do not have the ability in the future to manage everything from an AI perspective. So we're going to have to think about how those skills are built within our countries, within our markets, how they're sort of built within our recruiting teams and other broader HR teams, so that there is more responsibility and accountability taken on at a local level for the management of those tools.
Yeah, fantastic response, Tom. Thank you very much. I have to go to the final question, even though we're running a little bit out of time, because I think this is great from Hamish Irving. How do we best develop AI literacy in our recruiters? I did a poll on LinkedIn a couple of weeks or so ago about, where are you with AI? And I think the something like two-thirds or three-quarters of the responses was they self-identified as basic. So in other words, just using ChatGPT for message composition,
Yeah.
ingestion of documentation. Guess what? That's how I'm using it. So I've failed to move further forward in about 2 years of this. So there's a blocker there. How do recruiters become more AI literate in your view, Tom?
I mean, look, I mean, I can only talk from our position, and we're very spoiled in that sense. We have across Accenture, huge amounts of training on AI. Everyone's got to complete what we call our TQ, or technology quotient, and there's now about 15 different modules, and one of those is around generative AI. I think we've got two or three on AI now. And every employee in Accenture has got to complete those modules. And it's fairly in-depth training around AI, because there's an expectation across Accenture that everyone has a technology quotient and understands technology. That's the nature of our business. So the expectation is that all employees understand it. So from an overview of understanding of AI, that we're lucky enough to have that. Also within our recruiting function, we do have specific, I won't name them, but we do work very closely with a recruiting learning provider, and we have developed in partnership with them all sorts of recruiting training, and that they do now provide some pretty good stuff around AI literacy and AI within recruiting. So we are utilizing that too. So those are the sorts of things we do across HR as well. HR in general is very good at having these conversations and encouraging people to get into Copilot, get into Amethyst, which is our own product, and start experimenting with it and doing those sorts of things. We also have quite robust guidelines you might expect about what data you should put into tools, what data you shouldn't put into
Mhm.
tools. So those are some of the things we do, but I do appreciate that we're quite privileged, being the enterprise and the organization that we are, in terms of what we have access to. So
Yeah, no worries. Well, firstly, that's one of the things HR and TA can do, like have start agitating for a sort of a company-wide leveling up of AI literacy, just and kind of being part of our own consideration there, but also AI self-enablement. I mean, there's a lot of technologies out there, there's a lot of information out there published by some of the foundational players. We've just got to carve out time to get in there. And leaders probably, even though there's pressure to do more with less, one of the things you have to do is to try and create the space for your team, so that they can self-develop and can learn. Because if you're leaning on them to just max out and squeezing them at 100% every single sort of minute of the day, there's just no bandwidth for them to change or sort of process, because they're still so operationally activated. So it's a leadership task. Try and create the space for the team. Okay, Tom, listen, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing time with us. We're a little bit over time, but so I'll let you go. Wonderful having a chat with you, man. We'll love to get you back at some point. Good luck with all of your experimentations with Accenture. Uh,
awesome.
I mean, I hope it's not a year before we have a chat, but let's make it at the very least a year, because it would be great to have a review and see how you're getting on with some of the
Yeah.
experimentations that you're doing. Tom Sayer, wonderful to have you on the show. Have a very good day, man.
Thanks, Sam. Great talking. Speak soon. Thanks, everyone.
Wasn't that great, folks? I need to do more of these one-to-one sessions, I feel. I mean, I love doing the panel discussions. They're fantastic. We're going to have a panel discussion, in fact, in about 4 hours' time. I think it's really important to do debates. Yeah, at the same time, how cool is it sometimes to do the deep dives as well? I've got to mix it up. It may even be a different show. I wonder whether we should just do a panel show and a deep dive show. Let me know in the comments, actually, folks. Do you want me to do another Brainfood Live? I don't know, midweek where we do a one-to-one like this? I mean, I can talk forever, so I've got the time. But you let me know whether that's worth your time to whether you got the bandwidth to take another hour of me on screen. Okay, anyway, that's it. I am out of the I am out of here. I'm going to relocate to a new hotel. And we're going to be back in about 4 hours' time, 3 or 4 hours' time, where we're going to be talking about candidate fraud. It's a recruitment emergency. We're here with Jason Zoltak, Ryan Coulter, Glenn Lindley, and Timothy Koo Jones. What are we doing with not only the surge of applicant flow, but like literally fraudulent candidates? People are trying to hack into our systems. Do we have a technique to deal with it? Let's talk about it. Follow the channel if you want to get updated on this. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, just follow my account if you haven't already. You'll be updated on when we're live. We're going to be back in about 4 hours' time. Okay, folks, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'll see you shortly.